The words still come back to me sometimes. Not because they were loud. Not because my mother-in-law screamed them across the room. She said them quietly, almost calmly, and somehow that made them hurt even more. She looked at me from across my own kitchen table and said, "Leaving you was the best decision my son ever made." I remember looking down at my hands. I had been holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold. For a few seconds I did not say anything. I simply sat there and listened to the clock on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. My husband, Daniel, had left our home 3 days earlier. He had packed 2 suitcases, taken his laptop, and walked out without looking back. He had told me he needed space. He had told me he was tired. He had told me that maybe our marriage had been a mistake. But his mother had come that afternoon with something different. She had come to make sure I understood that, in her mind, I was the mistake. I looked at her. She was sitting straight in the chair, her handbag resting beside her. She looked completely comfortable. I wondered if she had practiced those words before coming. Maybe she had. Maybe she had imagined my face. Maybe she had wanted to see me break. But I did not. I simply asked, "Is that what Daniel told you?" She shook her head. "No. He did not have to tell me." She paused. Then she added, "A mother knows when her son is unhappy." I swallowed. There were so many things I wanted to say. I wanted to remind her that I had been married to Daniel for 16 years. I wanted to remind her that I had stood beside him when he lost his job, when his father died, when he became sick, when his business failed, when he was afraid. I wanted to remind her that I had never walked away. Not once. But I knew arguing would not change anything. So I asked the only question that mattered. "Does Daniel know you are here?" She smiled. "Yes." That answer made my heart sink. I looked toward the hallway. Daniel's old coat was still hanging by the door. His shoes were still under the bench. His favorite mug was still on the kitchen shelf. Everything looked normal. Except my husband was gone. My mother-in-law stood up. She adjusted her coat and said, "You should start thinking about your future." I looked at her. My future? Yes. She picked up her handbag. "You cannot keep waiting for a man who has already chosen another life." My heart stopped for a moment. Another life. Those words stayed with me. I asked quietly, "Is there another woman?" She did not answer. She simply looked at me. That look was enough. I felt something inside me change. Not anger. Not hatred. Something quieter. Something like acceptance. She walked toward the door. Then she turned around. "One more thing," she said. I waited. "Do not make this harder for Daniel." I almost smiled, because I suddenly understood something. They thought I was helpless. They thought I had nothing. They thought I would sit in that house and cry until Daniel decided what to do with me. They did not know me as well as they believed. And they certainly did not know what I had discovered 2 weeks earlier. I watched my mother-in-law walk away. The door closed. I stood alone in the hallway. For several minutes I did nothing. Then I went back to the kitchen. I opened the bottom drawer of the cabinet. Under some old documents and a small box of photographs was a folder. A simple brown folder. I had almost forgotten about it. Picked it up. My hands were shaking. Inside that folder was a document that could change everything. But I did not call Daniel. I did not call his mother. I did not call a friend. I made one call. And the person who answered the phone had been waiting for me to make it. "Hello," I said. There was a pause. Then a calm voice replied, "I was wondering when you would call." I closed my eyes, because I knew that from that moment on, nothing in my marriage would ever be the same. My name is Claire. I was 43 years old when all of this happened. For 16 years I believed I understood my husband. His name was Daniel. When we first met, he was 28 and I was 27. Neither of us had much money. We were both working ordinary jobs. He worked at a small accounting office. I worked at a medical supply company. We met because one of my coworkers invited me to dinner after work. Daniel happened to be there. I remember that he was not the loudest person in the room. He did not tell jokes. He did not try to impress anyone. He simply listened. When I spoke, he looked at me. Really looked at me. That was what I noticed first. At the end of the evening, he walked me to my car. It had started raining. He took off his jacket and held it above my head while we crossed the parking lot. I laughed and said, "You are going to get soaked." He smiled. "I'll dry." That was Daniel. At least that was the Daniel I knew. We dated for almost 2 years. He proposed on a quiet Sunday morning. There was no restaurant, no crowd, no music, just the two of us sitting in our tiny apartment, eating toast. He suddenly put down his coffee and said, "Claire, I think I want to spend the rest of my life eating toast with you." I laughed. Then I realized he was serious. He took a small ring from his pocket. It was simple, nothing expensive, but I loved it. We married 6 months later. His mother, Margaret, did not seem happy about it. She was polite, very polite, too polite. At the wedding, she hugged me and said, "Welcome to the family." But her eyes told me something else. I did not understand what it was at the time. Later I would. Margaret had always imagined a different wife for her son, someone from a wealthy family, someone who could help Daniel build a bigger life, someone who would never question him. I was not that woman. I came from an ordinary family. My parents owned a small grocery store. We lived simply. We worked hard. And we believed that marriage meant standing beside each other when life became difficult. Daniel believed that too. At least he used to. Our first years together were not perfect. We argued about money. We argued about his long working hours. Sometimes I became impatient. Sometimes he became quiet. But we always found our way back. That was what marriage meant to me. Not never hurting each other, but choosing each other again, and again, and again. After 5 years, Daniel decided to start his own business. It was a small consulting company. He had big dreams. I supported him. We used our savings. I took extra hours at work. We stopped eating out. We canceled our vacation. There were months when we counted every dollar before buying groceries. But I never complained. I believed in him. The business eventually grew. Not quickly, but slowly. We bought our first house. It was not large. It had a small garden in the back and a kitchen with yellow cabinets. Daniel hated those cabinets. I loved them. He said they made the house look old. I said they made it feel warm. We laughed about that for years. We built our life there. Every birthday, every Christmas, every difficult conversation, every quiet Sunday morning. The house became more than a house. It became our history. And Margaret never fully accepted it. She visited often. Sometimes she would walk through the house and quietly point out things she thought we should change. Daniel could afford a better neighborhood now. Why is the kitchen still like this? You should replace these curtains. I never argued. I would smile. Maybe someday. She always wanted more. A larger house. A newer car. More money. More status. Daniel used to defend me. One evening after she left, I asked him if her comments bothered him. He shook his head. "She is my mother. That doesn't mean she is always right." He smiled. "You know what I mean." I did. And for a long time I believed nothing could come between us. Then Daniel's business began to change. He started working later. He became distant. First I thought he was stressed. Then I thought he was tired. Then I blamed myself. That is what we often do when someone we love begins pulling away. We search our own hearts first. We ask ourselves what we did wrong. I asked Daniel many times, "Are you okay?" He always said yes. "Is something bothering you?" "No." "Are we okay?" He would look at me and say, "Of course." But something was not okay. I could feel it. There were little changes. His phone became more private. He started taking calls outside. He began locking his office door. He stopped telling me about his day. And then Margaret started calling more often. First I thought nothing of it. She would ask about Daniel. "How is he? Busy? Is he sleeping enough?" "I think so." Then one evening she asked me something strange. "Claire, are you happy?" I laughed softly. What kind of question is that? I am serious. I paused. "Yes." She sighed. "I hope you are." I did not understand. Then she said, "Sometimes people stay in marriages because they are afraid to start over." I felt uncomfortable. I asked, "Are you trying to tell me something?" "No." She changed the subject. But I could not forget that conversation. A few weeks later, Daniel came home after midnight. I was sitting in the living room. He walked past me. "Long day?" I asked. "Yes." "Did you eat?" "No." I stood. "I can make something." He shook his head. "I am not hungry." Then he went upstairs. I sat there alone. The house was quiet, and for the first time I wondered if my husband was becoming a stranger. I did not know that within months, I would be sitting across from his mother, listening to her tell me that leaving me was the best decision he had ever made. And I certainly did not know that the truth was much bigger than a marriage. The first real change came on a Tuesday. I remember because it was raining. Daniel usually called me when he was leaving work. That day he did not. I waited until 7, then 8, and 9 I called. He did not answer. 10 he sent a message. "Don't wait up." That was all. I stared at the screen for a long time. I typed, "Are you okay?" Then I deleted it. I typed, "Where are you?" I deleted that too. Finally I wrote, "Okay. Drive safely." He replied with a thumbs up. That tiny symbol hurt more than I expected. For 16 years, I had received long messages from my husband, little jokes, photos of his lunch, complaints about traffic, pictures of things he thought I would like. Now I received a thumbs up. I told myself not to overthink it. But the next day was the same. And the day after that. One Friday evening Daniel came home and placed his keys on the table. He did not kiss me. He walked straight to the kitchen. I followed him. "Daniel." He turned. "What?" "Can we talk?" He sighed. "About what?" "Us." He looked away. "There is nothing to talk about." "There is something." He rubbed his forehead. "I am tired, Claire." "I know." "No, you don't." His voice was still calm, but there was frustration in it. "I am tired of feeling like my life is going nowhere." I was confused. "Your business is doing well." "That is not what I mean." "Then what do you mean?" He did not answer. I waited. Finally he said, "I don't know if I want this life anymore." My heart dropped. "What life?" He looked at me. "This." One word. This. Our house. Our marriage. Our routines. Our life. I whispered, "You don't want us?" He looked down. "I don't know." That night I cried quietly in the bathroom. I did not want him to hear me. The next morning I acted normal. I made coffee. I cooked breakfast. I asked him if he wanted eggs. He said no. We lived like two people sharing a house, not like husband and wife. Over the next few weeks the tension grew. Margaret became more involved. She called Daniel every day. Sometimes they talked for an hour. He would go into the office and close the door. I never listened. I never wanted to be that wife. But sometimes I heard my name, and sometimes I heard silence. One afternoon Margaret came over unexpectedly. I was cleaning the living room. She stood in the doorway and watched me. "You look tired." "I am." She nodded. "Daniel has been under a lot of pressure." "I know." "He needs peace." I looked at her. "I am not stopping him from having peace." She smiled faintly. "I didn't say you were." But she had. She had said it without saying it. I put down the cloth. "Margaret, is there something you want to tell me?" She looked surprised. "No, because I feel like something is happening." She sighed. "Claire, sometimes a marriage ends long before people admit it." I felt my throat tighten. "Is Daniel planning to leave me?" She looked at me. "I think you should ask him." "I have." "And?" "He says he doesn't know." Margaret's face became serious. "Then maybe you should give him space." I nodded. "I have been trying." She walked toward the door. Before leaving she said, "Sometimes love means knowing when to let go." I watched her leave. I stood there for several minutes. Then I sat down. That night I looked through old photographs. There was one from our 10th anniversary. Daniel was standing behind me with his arms around my shoulders. We were both laughing. I stared at that picture. I wondered where those people had gone. Maybe they were still there. Maybe they had simply been buried under years of stress. Or maybe I had been holding on to something that no longer existed. I did not know. But then something happened that changed the way I saw everything. Daniel left his laptop open. I was not looking for anything. I had gone into his office to place a document on his desk. An email appeared on the screen. I saw the name, Emily. I stopped. I did not open the email. I did not read it, but I saw the subject line. About us. My heart started beating quickly. I stepped away. I closed the laptop. I walked out. For the rest of the evening I said nothing. I wanted to ask. I wanted to know. But I was afraid. The next morning, Daniel told me he needed to stay with a friend for a few days. I asked, "Is it because of Emily?" He froze. Only for a second. But I saw it. "What are you talking about?" I saw her name. He looked away. "It's not what you think." Those were the words people always say when it is exactly what you think. I sat down. "Are you seeing her?" He did not answer. That silence told me everything. I felt like the room had become very small. "How long?" "Claire." "How long?" He finally said. "A few months." I closed my eyes. Few months. While I was making dinner. While I was waiting for him. While I was asking if he was okay. While I was believing his tiredness was simply stress. There had been another woman. I asked, "Does your mother know?" He looked at me. That was all the answer I needed. I nodded slowly. "So everyone knew except me." "No." "She knew." He did not speak. I looked at him. "You told her." "She is my mother." I smiled sadly. "That is your answer to everything." He packed his bag that afternoon. Before he left, he stood by the door. I wanted him to stay. I wanted to tell him we could fix it. But I did not. I simply said, "If you leave Daniel, do not blame me for what happens next." He looked confused. "What does that mean?" I shook my head. "I don't know yet." He walked out. The door closed. And 3 days later, Margaret came to tell me that leaving me was the best decision her son had ever made. After Margaret left, I sat alone in the kitchen. The rain had started again. It tapped softly against the window. I looked at the brown folder on the counter. I had kept it for nearly 7 years. It had belonged to Daniel's father. His name was Thomas. He had passed away before Daniel and I married. Thomas had owned a small piece of land outside the city. It was not valuable at the time. It was an old property with a small building on it. Years earlier, Thomas had asked me to help organize some papers. I had found a document among them. It was a copy of an agreement. I had not understood its importance then. But 7 years ago, a lawyer had contacted me. He told me Thomas had left instructions that affected Daniel's business. At the time, I did not think much of it. Daniel had asked me not to get involved. He said he would handle everything. So I trusted him. But 2 weeks before he left, I had received a letter. Came from the same lawyer. I had placed it in the brown folder. The letter said there was a legal matter involving property that had been transferred into Daniel's business. The property was not simply his. It had been placed in a family trust. And I was listed as one of the beneficiaries. At the time, I had not wanted to believe it. I had put the letter away. Now I understood why Margaret had been so eager to make me leave quietly. Maybe she knew. Maybe Daniel knew. Maybe Emily knew. I picked up my phone. I looked at the number. My finger hovered over it. Then I called. The lawyer answered after 2 rings. "Claire." "Yes. I have been waiting for you to call. I received your letter." "I know. Does Daniel know?" There was a pause. "I cannot discuss his private communications with you." "I understand." I took a breath. "But I need to know something." "What?" "Can Daniel sell the property without my permission?" The lawyer became quiet. Then he said, "No." My eyes closed. "What happens if he tries?" "That depends on what he has already done." My heart started beating faster. "What has he done?" "I think you should come to my office. Today. If you can." I looked around my kitchen. The place suddenly felt unfamiliar. "Yes. I will see you this afternoon." I hung up. That was the call. The one call that changed everything. I did not call Daniel. I did not call Margaret. I drove to the lawyer's office. His name was Robert. He had known Thomas for years. When I walked into his office, he stood and greeted me. He looked serious. "Claire, please sit down." I sat. He opened a file. I wish you had contacted me earlier. I didn't know what was happening. He nodded. I understand. He showed me several documents. Thomas had created a trust before his death. The purpose was to protect the property from being sold without the agreement of certain family members. Daniel had access to the business, but he did not have complete control over the trust. And neither did Margaret. Then Robert showed me another document. My name was there. Claire Bennett, beneficiary. I stared at it. Why didn't Daniel tell me? Robert looked at me carefully. That is a question you need to ask him. I shook my head. I think I already know. Robert continued. There is something else. He opened another file. Daniel recently applied for a loan. I looked up. For his business? Yes. And he used the property as part of the financial arrangement. My stomach tightened. Can he do that? Not without completing certain legal steps. Did he? Robert looked at me. No. I sat back. Suddenly everything made sense. Daniel had been distant. He had been talking to Emily. Margaret had been telling me to let go. And now I knew why they wanted me out. They needed me gone before I understood what I had a right to. I asked, what happens now? Robert closed the file. That depends on what you want. I looked at him. For the first time in weeks, someone had asked me that question. What did I want? I thought about my marriage. I thought about 16 years. I thought about the woman named Emily. I thought about Daniel walking out. I thought about Margaret sitting in my kitchen and telling me I was the reason her son had finally become happy. I could have fought. I could have tried to destroy them. But that was not what I wanted. I want the truth, I said. Robert nodded. And after that? I looked out the window. I want peace. He smiled gently. Then we will start with the truth. The next week was difficult. Robert began gathering records. I did not understand every detail. I did not need to. I only needed to know what belonged to me, what belonged to Daniel, and what had been done without my knowledge. Then Robert called me one morning. Claire, there is something you should see. I went to his office. He placed several pages on the table. These are financial records from the business. I looked at them. There were payments I did not recognize. Large payments. Transfers. Expenses. Some of them were connected to Emily. I felt sick. Who is she? Robert answered carefully. I believe she is connected to the new company Daniel has been planning. I stared at the papers. So it was not just an affair. There was a business plan. A new company. A new life. And I was supposed to disappear from the old one. Robert continued. Daniel appears to have been moving some business activity into another company. Whose company? Emily's. I laughed quietly. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes the truth is so painful that your mind does not know how else to react. So he was leaving me and taking everything with him. That appears to be the plan. I looked down. Then I remembered Margaret's words. Do not make this harder for Daniel. She had known. Maybe she had helped him. Maybe she had convinced herself she was protecting her son. I did not know. But I knew one thing. I was done being silent. Robert asked me, do you want to take legal action? I thought for a long time. I want to protect myself. That is different. Yes. I did not want revenge. I wanted fairness. There is a difference. A few days later Daniel called. His voice sounded tired. Claire, can we talk? Yes. I think we should meet. Okay. We met at a small cafe. He arrived 10 minutes late. He looked older. Tired. For a moment, I remembered the man who had held his jacket over my head in the rain. Then I remembered the email. I sat across from him. He looked at me. I am sorry. I did not answer. I know I hurt you. I nodded. Yes. He took a breath. I did not plan for things to happen this way. What way did you plan? He looked down. I thought we could separate peacefully. Peacefully. Yes. I almost smiled. You left me without telling me the truth. I was going to tell you. When? I don't know. I looked at him. Did you love her? He was quiet. Finally he said, I thought I did. That answer was enough. I asked, did you know about the trust? He looked at me. His face changed. What trust? I knew immediately. He was lying. I placed my hands on the table. You knew. No. Daniel. He sighed. Claire, please. Did you know? He looked away. Yes. I felt my heart break in a completely different way. Not because he had another woman. Not because he was leaving. Because he had known I had legal protection and had still allowed me to believe I had nothing. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered. Because I thought you would stop me. I looked at him. Stop you from what? Selling the property. I nodded. So that was the plan. He did not answer. I stood. I think we are finished. He looked up. Claire. No. I reached for my bag. He said, I never wanted to hurt you. I looked at him. Sometimes people hurt us because they want something more than they want to be honest. Then I left. I did not cry until I got home. I sat in my car for almost 20 minutes. I looked at our house, the yellow kitchen, the small garden, the old bench near the door. So much of my life was there. But I understood something that afternoon. A house can hold memories, but memories cannot hold a marriage together. People have to do that. And Daniel had stopped choosing us long before he walked away. 3 days after I met Daniel, Margaret came back. This time she did not look confident. She looked nervous. I opened the door. She said, Can I come in? I stepped aside. She walked into the living room. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she said, Daniel told me you met with the lawyer. Yes. She nodded. I thought you might. I looked at her. Why? She sat down. Because you were always more careful than Daniel. That sentence surprised me. I sat across from her. Did you know? She looked down. Yes. I felt something inside me become very still. How long? A few years. I closed my eyes. So when you told me leaving me was the best decision he ever made. She sighed. I was angry. At me. At the situation. No. I looked at her. You were angry at me. She did not deny it. Then she said something I never expected. I blamed you because I could not blame my son. I stared at her. She continued. I knew Daniel was making bad choices. Then why did you support him? She looked at her hands. Because he is my son. I shook my head. That is not an answer. She looked up. I know. Her voice was softer now. I thought if I supported him, he would be happy. Was he? She was silent. No. That was the first honest answer she had given me. I asked, What about Emily? Margaret sighed. She was never the person I thought she was. I said nothing. Margaret looked around the room. She saw the photographs. Our wedding picture. Our anniversary picture. Daniel's graduation photo. She looked at them for a long time. Then she whispered, I thought you were the problem. I felt tears in my eyes. And now? She looked at me. Now I think I was. We sat there quietly. There was no dramatic apology. No shouting. No sudden forgiveness. Just two women sitting in a room filled with memories. Finally Margaret said, I am sorry. I nodded. Thank you. She wiped her eyes. Do you hate me? I thought about it. No. Why? Because hate would keep me tied to you. She looked at me. I want to be free. She nodded. I understand. Before she left, she stood at the door. Then she turned. Claire. Yes. Did you ever stop loving Daniel? I looked down. That is a difficult question. I'm sorry. I shook my head. No. It's okay. I thought for a moment. I stopped trusting him. She nodded. And sometimes losing trust hurts more than losing love. She left. I closed the door. Then I stood there for a while. For the first time since Daniel left, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness. Not yet. But peace. The legal process took several months. During that time, Daniel and Emily's plans began to fall apart. The loan was delayed. The business transfer was questioned. The property could not simply be moved into their new company. Daniel became increasingly desperate. But I refused to fight with him. Everything went through Robert. One afternoon Daniel came to the house. He stood outside the door. I almost did not open it. But I did. He looked at me. I want to talk. Okay. He stayed outside. I made a mistake. I nodded. Yes. I thought I could start over. You can. He looked surprised. But not with me. He lowered his eyes. I know. There was a long silence. Then he said, Emily left. I did not react. When she realized the business wasn't going to work the way we planned, she left. I looked at him. I'm sorry. He laughed bitterly. You don't have to be. I know. He looked at the house. Do you remember when we bought this place? Yes. I was so happy. So was I. I ruined everything. I did not correct him. He continued. My mother told me you would forgive me. I looked at him. Did she? No. He shook his head. She told me I should ask. I thought about that. Do you want forgiveness? Yes. I took a breath. I can forgive you. His eyes filled with tears. But forgiveness does not mean I have to take you back. He nodded slowly. I understand. I hope you do. He looked at me. Are you happy? I smiled faintly. I am learning. He nodded. Then he walked away. I watched him go. There was sadness in my heart. But there was no desire to follow him. That was when I knew I had healed more than I realized. The divorce was finalized several months later. We divided what belonged to each of us. The family property remained protected. I did not become rich. I did not suddenly have a perfect life. But I had something I had almost lost. Control over my own future. I stayed in the house. I changed the curtains. I painted the kitchen. I replaced the old yellow cabinets. But I kept one thing. The small wooden table where Margaret had once sat and told me that leaving me was the best decision her son had ever made. I kept it because I wanted to remember. Not the insult. The lesson. People can tell you who they think you are. That does not make them right. People can leave. That does not mean you are worthless. And sometimes the person you thought would destroy your life is simply the person who forces you to finally build your own. The first year after the divorce was quiet. Very quiet. First, I did not like the silence. I had spent 16 years hearing another person in the house. Daniel's footsteps. His keys. His phone. His voice. Then suddenly there was nothing. But slowly I began to appreciate it. I started waking early. I drank coffee near the window. I planted flowers in the garden. I joined a small community group. I started seeing old friends again. One friend told me, "You seem different." I asked, "In a good way?" She smiled. "Yes." "How?" "You seem like yourself." That sentence stayed with me. Maybe that was what had happened. I had spent so many years being Daniel's wife that I had forgotten who Claire was. I began finding her again. I took a cooking class. I traveled alone for the first time. I visited a quiet town near the coast. I sat beside the water and watched the sunset. No one was waiting for me. No one was telling me where to go. No one was disappointed in my choices. I was simply there. And for the first time that felt enough. Margaret and I did not become close. But sometimes she called. Not to talk about Daniel. Not to ask about money. Just to say hello. One afternoon she asked if she could visit. I said yes. She brought a small box. Inside were old photographs. Pictures of Daniel as a child. She handed them to me. "You should have these." I looked at them. "He is still your son." "Yes." She paused. "But you were part of his life for 16 years. I smiled. "Thank you." She sat quietly. Then she said, "I have been thinking about what I said to you that day." I knew exactly what she meant. She looked down. "I was cruel. You were hurt. That does not excuse it." "No." She nodded. "I wanted my son to choose what I wanted for him." I looked at her. "And he did. For a while." "Yes." She sighed. "I think I confused control with love." That was a powerful thing to hear from her. I did not say anything. Sometimes people need silence to hear themselves. Before leaving, she hugged me. It was the first real hug we had shared. Not a polite hug. Not a family gathering hug. A human hug. Two people acknowledging the pain they had caused each other. I closed the door after she left. Then I went outside. The garden was blooming. The flowers were bright. The air was warm. I stood there and realized something. My life had not ended. It had simply changed. People often ask me about that phone call. The call I made after Margaret told me I had been left. They asked me what I was thinking. The truth is I was scared. I was not brave. I did not know what would happen. I only knew that I could not sit quietly and allow other people to make decisions about my life. That call did not save my marriage. It did not bring Daniel back. It did not punish Margaret. It did not make Emily disappear. What it did was give me information. And information gave me a choice. That is something I will never forget. When you are hurt, you may feel like you have no choices. You may believe the person who left you controls your future. But sometimes you only need to stop reacting and start asking questions. What do I know? What do I not know? What belongs to me? What do I want? What am I willing to accept? Those questions changed my life. I also learned that silence can be powerful. I did not need to scream at Daniel. I did not need to insult Emily. I did not need to fight with Margaret. I simply needed to stand still long enough to understand what was happening. There were days when I wanted revenge. I am not going to pretend there were not. There were nights when I imagined Daniel regretting everything. I imagined Margaret calling me and admitting I had been right. I imagined Emily realizing what she had lost. But eventually those thoughts became less important. Because I realized something. Revenge still keeps you connected to the people who hurt you. Peace lets you walk away. I chose peace. And that choice took time. Healing was not one beautiful morning when I woke up and felt fine. It happened slowly. A little every day. The first morning I did not check my phone hoping Daniel had called. The first dinner I cooked only for myself. The first night I slept without crying. The first time I laughed with a friend and did not feel guilty. The first time I walked past the old photograph and felt gratitude instead of pain. Those small moments were my healing. Not dramatic. Not perfect. Just real. If someone listening to my story is going through something similar, I would not tell her to be strong. People say that too easily. Be strong. Move on. Forget him. Sounds simple. But it is not. I would tell her to breathe. To slow down. To gather the facts. To protect herself. To speak to someone she trusts. And most importantly, to remember that being left does not mean being worthless. Someone's decision to leave you is not a measurement of your value. Daniel left. That was his choice. It did not erase the years I gave. It did not erase the love I offered. It did not erase the person I was. His choices belonged to him. My future belonged to me. That was the hardest lesson. But it was also the most freeing. I used to think marriage was about holding on. Now I believe marriage is about choosing each other freely. Every day. And when one person stops choosing the relationship, the other person cannot carry it alone. You can love someone deeply and still let them go. You can forgive someone and still keep your distance. You can remember the good years without returning to the person who hurt you. These are not contradictions. They are part of growing older. Part of becoming wiser. Part of learning that love should not require you to disappear. Sometimes I think about that afternoon. Margaret sitting across from me. Her cold words. Leaving you was the best decision my son ever made. 5 minutes later I made one call. I did not know then that the call would change my life. I thought I was simply asking for information. But sometimes a small decision becomes the beginning of a new life. I did not win because Daniel lost. I did not win because Emily left. I did not win because Margaret apologized. I won because I found myself again. Today the house is different. The kitchen is brighter. The garden is fuller. There are no angry voices. No secret phone calls. No waiting for someone to come home. Sometimes I sit at the same kitchen table and drink tea. And I think about the woman I was that day. She was frightened. She was heartbroken. But she was still standing. I wish I could go back and tell her something. I would sit beside her. I would hold her hand. And I would say, "You are going to be okay. You do not need to chase him. You do not need to prove your worth. You do not need revenge. You only need to protect your heart and take one step at a time. Because life does not always give us the ending we wanted. Sometimes it gives us a different beginning. Daniel was once the center of my life. Now he is simply part of my history. I do not hate him. I do not wait for him, and I do not wish him pain. I hope he learns from what happened. I hope Margaret does too. As for me, I am still learning, still growing, still finding little reasons to smile. And if there is one thing I know now, it is this. When someone walks away from you, do not immediately believe that you have been abandoned. Sometimes you have simply been released. Released from a life that had become too small. Released from the need to constantly prove that you are enough. Released from people who only valued you when you were useful to them. And sometimes the most important call you ever make is not the call that brings someone back. It is the call that helps you move forward. Mine lasted less than 5 minutes. But it changed everything. And that is why, when I remember the words my mother-in-law said that day, I no longer feel broken. I simply smile. Because she was right about one thing. Leaving changed my life. She just never understood whose life she was talking about. It was mine. And for the first time in many years, that life finally belonged to me.